Okay, what is this? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for choosing this talk over the rest. It was the right choice. I will prove it to you. Um, and congratulations, well, for the Google folks for having this fantastic stuff, but also for you, the audience, for having been able to find this place. Um, yeah. So today I will be talking about Liveops. It's only 30 minutes. There are a lot of topics. I've tried to compress it as much as I can. If you're not very familiar with Liveops, there will be a lot of things. But even if you're familiar with it, I'm sure there will be sites that you will find. I will be talking about the key factors on Liveops, some tips on how to manage them, as well as give you a quick example and some best practices on how to build Liveops schedule plan. Jumping on the key factors. Why? Because I'm not gonna even enter into trying to define Liveops. It's just an umbrella term, and depending who you ask, it can mean anything that goes inside of a live service game. However, what I'm going to do before jumping into key factors is talk about some common misconceptions that I've found often when dealing with Liveops or talking with people that maybe it's not familiar. I know it's not going to be you, but maybe, I don't know, people watching at home. The first is that many people think that Liveops is mainly offers and just a way to hypercharge the game monetization. But one thing to take in account is that it's not only that, it's also an engagement and retention mechanism. So if when designing Liveops and planning about them, you only think about how can they generate revenue or capture value from your users, you're missing out on a huge impact that they can have on keeping the players entertained and being content that players can also consume, as well as the capacity that Liveops have on the ability of your game to acquire new users with specific themes that maybe are appealing for those users, as well as reactivating your players. Another common misconception that I find very often is that Liveops should be targeted only or mainly to late game players. And that really depends on your game, because if in your game there's a significant amount of DAUs at the beginning or in the middle of a game, why would you target only the folks that are in the end? In the presentation, I'll talk about some ways how you can optimize how your Liveops performs with different stages. But one thing you don't have to miss out is that beyond just the activation and availability of the Liveops themselves, there's also a key factor on personalization, on triggering Liveops to the right player in the right moment. Some basic examples of that could be, for example, triggering retention calendars when you detect that some players have behaviors that they are about to churn, or maybe if a player has not been spending on a spender, you can trigger them aggressive offers to kind of reactivate them as a spender. And even more recently, we have seen very sophisticated examples of this. Monopoly Go, for example, it has a Liveop, a very short Liveop, I think it's like 20 minutes or something like that, which gets triggered when the player accumulates a certain amount of dice rolls. So what this makes is that if you accumulate a lot of dice rolls, the game triggers a kind of time-limited event that accelerates your ability to consume those dice rolls. So it's a very sophisticated way to use customization to expand Liveops beyond the availability. And last, and this maybe I think most of you work on mobile, but it's something that I find when I interact with people coming from console and PC, and the way how HD platforms do Liveops is that many people think that Liveops are something very unique, never to repeat. And in reality, and we'll see this later, one key aspect in Liveops is that you need to build templates with it first to optimize the effort that you have done in order to develop, them, but also because if you repeat templates of Liveops, you can learn from them and iterate and keep on improving them to become better and better with every activation. And the last one thing that I don't know why a lot of people misses out is that you can use Liveops to test features, to test rules and changes in the game on games where maybe A/B testing is complicated because they have a competitive component. No? One example, for example, could be the 2 versus 2 mode in Clash Royale, where A/B testing the availability of that mode would have been very complicated, given that the community is very strong and the game has a competitive element. So how can you manage exactly having a feature enabled for some players and not for others? And instead, what they did was run a series of Liveops where they activated that mode on a time-limited basis. They learned, they saw if players appreciate it, and then they made it permanent. But yeah, let's start with the key factors of Liveops. The first key factor, and it's relevant on everything that we do in games, because otherwise you generate technical debt and then do even small modifications takes a lot of effort. But on Liveops is critical because the speed and the demand that Liveops are going to require from your team and your capacity to ship is much bigger than for everything else. So when it comes to technology, I'm going to cover two different topics. No? One is the technology in order to operate the Liveops, to be able to schedule, to be able to manage complex segmentations, to be able to manage the availability. And another is the technology about for creating the Liveops content, no? The actual content that the players will see in the game. And one thing that is also very relevant for everything, but for Liveops in particular, is having a good analytics tech, because otherwise you will be throwing Liveops, but you may not know exactly what are the impact that they are generating. And particularly if you're thinking on setting them on a continuous improving process, you really need to be able to observe what's going on. So when it comes to the technology, when it comes to operating the Liveops, to operate Liveops, you want tools that allow you to do very sophisticated scheduling, management, and segmentation. Bare minimum things that you should look if you're thinking about building your own Liveops tool, which I don't recommend, or selecting one is, first, you need to be able to change game configs without a client update. Like if you need to do a client update in order to enable a Liveops, you basically will not be able to run it. You will not be able to so you will not be able to distribute that on time for the activation. You will not be able to react if something happens. You basically won't be able to run Liveops. Another important thing, which maybe for some of you, you take it for granted, but you will be surprised on how many companies, even companies in top grossing positions, don't have that, is the ability to schedule activations and deactivations of a specific configurations beforehand. No? So otherwise, you will have to be there in order to activate or deactivate the configurations, which will mean that because a big part of the Liveops run during the weekend, you won't have weekends off. Another important thing to take in account is that it's easy to manage complex segmentations and multiple configurations, because if you only have one line of Liveops, let's say, that's fairly easy. But very often you are going to want to customize that Liveops, so it makes sense to make it appear on different stages of the game and so on, and the complexity will become very, very difficult to manage unless the tool is really good. And last, I would look in my tool to have some direct CRM options, such as the ability to create reward gift pop-ups, which can also be used for compensation, as well as offers, because you don't want to have to put a lot of effort in order to trigger or to prepare an offer. My advice is that you choose one of the many third-party tools that exist in the market. These are some that are out there. However, I'm going to give you two advices coming from the trenches. The first is that you enable that your game is able to retrieve the latest batch of local configurations, or maybe run a default in case that the service is unavailable. I've heard Lyft actually a story where the service that we were using in one of the games I was working went down during Black Friday, and you can imagine how much money we lost because of course, the offers were not of Black Friday were not triggering. No, so have a plan B, and then another recommendation is first, obviously, evaluate the costs that these services have at scale, because depending on what's the RPU of your game, you want to architecture how many calls you do to this service in a different way in order to do not that many and not increase your maintenance costs, and have a way how to disable these Liveops calls automatically in case that you spam the server because of a bug or something like that. Again, I've lived the story that we did a testing and that testing had a problem and we spammed the Liveops server, and that came in a nice denial of service, which also made us lose a lot of money. And then when it comes to technology, it's not only technology about operating this Liveops, but also the creation of automatizing and making smooth the creation of content. Some tips that I can give you there, because if you don't invest on this, it's very easy to drown in your own Liveops, so then you cannot spend any time on improving them because you're too busy with just like scheduling them and operating them, is to build content generation tools that automate as many steps of the process as possible. Because if your Liveops need to be let's say the configuration of your Liveops need to be copy pasted manually from one place to another, and you do that many times, eventually somebody's going to make a human mistake, and that's going to be costly. And the more Liveops you run, the more you're going to be drowning in turning off fires generated by this. Another advice is that you invest on putting human error proof measures, such as, for example, in this example, this tool, which is user-wise, allows you to only set days and weeks. So your ability or the ability of a human to put an incorrect value and mess it up, the whole thing is quite limited, as opposed as if your tool would require Unix times, no? Where maybe, I don't know, you put a number that is very difficult to understand, and then you trigger the Liveop on 1979. As well as when your tool feeds configurations that are problematic, that have mistakes, have a way, don't make the game crash, please, because otherwise you will have your game crashing from time to time and you don't know what's going on. And invest on having that on making that the error mistakes inform you on where the problem is. Otherwise, you're going to have messages like this, no, where the configuration is wrong, but there are like 1,000 parameters there and you don't know what's wrong, and that's going to make your team lose a lot of time on trying to understand what was wrong, trying to fix it, and so on. That's going to decrease your capacity to have buffer to think on improvements, and just like spend more time on doing steps that do not provide value. And then another advice is have several and well-structured config environments. Many companies only have, for whatever reason, 2 config environments, QA and live, and that generates a lot of problems, because that means that you cannot have multiple people, or not easily have multiple people working at the same time in the environment. Often there are clashes of Liveops because people are testing things and stuff like that. So if you can have several config environments, you will save a lot of time. It will allow you to generate contents more easily, as well as if you can build in-house mechanism in the client or in the game itself to manage different sets of rewards, that will save you a lot of time. Because the typical thing that happens when you try to expose one Liveop to different stages of the life, or like early game, mid game, and so on, is that some rewards that make sense in the late game that do not make sense in the early game. And that already forces you to just to enable one feature into the different stages, have to do very complex segmentations of the rewards. If your game can manage that automatically, you will save a lot of time when setting up Liveops. going into this, one of the reasons why technology is so important is because key in Liveops is having a good process and a sustainable pace. No, I have this friend that says that on a game, on a live game, everything can be late. You can release late a feature and nobody dies. Just the feature gets enabled a bit later. You can release later an update and so on, except for the Liveops. Because if you miss the window of opportunity of Black Friday, good luck. Like there's no way to repay that back other than waiting 1 year, right? So there's a huge cost on being late on Liveops. That's why you need process that is sustainable. Another topic that happens is that I'm not sure how many of you have worked with premium games, but on premium games you can like do that effort, release the game, and then once it's released, you can take a rest. But on a live game, that moment doesn't exist. It's more than a sprint. A live game is kind of a marathon. So you don't want to, or you cannot maintain a pace that is burning your team. On Liveops, what is key is that you have not only a speed that is fast enough, but also that you are able to maintain it. Because chances are, if your game keeps operating for like 5 years, and your process is not sustainable, you're constantly burning people and so on, like your game is going to be a mid grinder, and it's going to be very difficult for you to retain the talent. So one thing that happens often, particularly when the people planning the Liveops are not those that are designing the Liveops, is that they don't consider the production cost. So they request Liveops as if they were free, but they are not actually free. No, some tips that I have on this in order to better estimate what is your actual capacity to do Liveops without burning your team is build a retro plan for them. No, so if you want a Liveop to go live in this specific moment, when do you need to start QA? When do you need to start the implementation? When do you need to start the design? And do it backwards. And you also want that Liveops are finished weeks before they go live, or as much time as possible, so that you can have buffer to react to unexpected stuff and make them go through QA. Because imagine that you launch them and then they are bugged, then you're going to have to put extra effort to fix it, and that's time that you're losing for being able to create the new batch of Liveops. Another thing is try to have this kind of Kaizen model where you're constantly improving your process, you're constantly doing retros and finding out how you can make your process more sustainable and more optimized to increase your capacity. Because here, the main goal, as I said, is you want to have your developers, designers, whoever scripts the Liveops, spend more time thinking on how they can improve those Liveops rather than just executing them or setting them up, which is not something that increases the value that they provide to your game. Another topic that is key is feature versatility. And this is very important when you're thinking about designing, how to design games on how to design features on a game that has Liveops and how to design Liveops themselves. No, so for me, what is very useful in this regard is think like all the game features are skeletons or platforms to run Liveops. No, so the more versatility they allow to change the graphics. Have customizable UI, customizable parameters, and so on, the more tools you will have to customize that experience and create Liveops around them. One example here is from Monster Legends, which is a game that I worked on, is that they have this feature which essentially it's a system that collects points and gives rewards when the player reaches specific milestones. And with that feature, just tweaking the rewards and the conditions that generate the points, they are able to generate very different features. No, they have, for example, they can generate a low intensity goal around just playing, because every time you feed your monsters, you get points. But they can also create high intensity goals, or even a feature that gives additional rewards for spending hard currency. No, so it's one feature, but very different experiences that they can generate with them. Another example, which maybe you have seen if you play Brawl Stars, is this feature, which can be used to generate very different things. No, so for example, in the lunar, when it was the lunar New Year, they had this calendar where players were getting a gift every day that they log in for during the celebration. But then with the same feature, they have been able to create this type of chained offer wall that if you play Royal Match or Monopoly Go, you surely have seen, where you buy something and then you unlock a series of rewards, or then there's a set of chained set of list of rewards, which at some point require you to monetize in order to keep on claiming. No, so again, if we think on what because they have a high versatility within this feature, they are able to create essentially two different experiences with one single tech. No, and here there's a quick list of the many things that they are able to change. No, like a time clock, being able to put a price or put it free, being able to change the background and so on. And we are developers. We know that this was probably one implementation, or the second thing was built as an expansion of the technology of the first one. But for the player, it's very different. It's maybe even understood as two completely different features, right? So that's the kind of thing that you want to do. Have versatility in your features so that you can generate different experiences within them. Another very important factor is in-game communication. No, obviously, if you have a feature Liveops running and players don't know about it, it doesn't generate an impact, which is something trivial. But this can become very challenging when you have many Liveops running at the same time. And today, for example, somebody was asking me I think it was Stan from AppMagic was asking me the question, or like people ask him the question on when do you have enough Liveops? When there is this moment where you have too many Liveops and the player gets saturated? And a lot of that has to do with the ability of the the ability of the game to communicate effectively all those Liveops without saturating the player. If all of your Liveops require a pop-up, then just with 5 Liveops, you are going to saturate the player because its experience is going to be pop-up, pop-up, pop-up. Very disturbing. While if the game is able to communicate it in a much less traumatic way, you will be able to run a high amount of them. Some good examples that I like particularly, Royal Match is not here, but it's probably the best example, is, for example, in Township or Monopoly Go, the Liveops information is structured around the main menu. So sometimes they do have pop-ups, usually when the feature activates or when it gives rewards. But on a regular basis, they just appear, they just remind you that they are active without disrupting your regular game experience. In Royal Match is even better because those widgets are quite sophisticated. They have progression bars and they highlight rewards and stuff like that. So as you keep playing, you keep receiving information that those Liveops are going on without that disrupting your gameplay experience, so they can run many Liveops at once without that being overwhelming for players. But another aspect that we don't have to miss is, particularly with thinking about the potential of reactivating or acquiring players, is the element of communication that happens outside of the game. No? On what side? Liveops are more effective if they are coordinated with marketing materials that are able to capitalize that. Liveops calendars, in my opinion, or at least in my experience, are great, particularly if once the game is a bit mature and it has a very established base of features, because that allows players to strategize around it and so on. Just remember not to give them information on when you're going to be running offers, because otherwise you are going to make that they alter their spending in order to get benefit from the offers. And Supercell also is a great example as well, because they have been able to establish a first-party close communication with their players, and through tools such as their creator boost, they have been able to create a big range of influencers that essentially act as ambassadors. So whenever they announce a new thing, a new Liveop or something, they have an army of influencers that are going to talk about that and reach their audience and expand the capacity of those Liveops to reach players. Now, there are three other points that are very relevant when it comes to Liveops, but to me they are intrinsically linked, which is length, for how long Liveops runs, how often it runs, so cadence, and intensity, which is how demanding or how disruptive it is for the player. No. So when it comes to length, in my experience, what happens with when a live op, any kind of live op, lasts for more than 24 hours, and it's 24 hours because generally during the day players connect at different moments of the day, is that usually the engagement or monetization curves generally look like this, no? Depending on the type of live op, some Hello. Okay, thank you. The reason why it looks like this is because at the beginning of a live op, at the beginning of an offer or something like that, there's a lot of players that jump in and interact with it very, very early. Spenders and high engagement users, provided that there's no limit, they complete the event very early on and then they don't have anything else. And then at the end, if there's an offer is about to expire or a competition is about to end, there's this last push that people does. So that's why it looks like that. But this is not optimal because it means that a lot of the time in your live op, like if you make them run for a very long time, they have this kind of desert of engagement in the middle, no? And it's kind of wasteful. So first of all, like try to, if you're suffering this kind of thing or you're seeing this kind of thing on your live ops, try to do shorter instances of live ops. But some tips in order to improve this beyond just increase the cadence and do shorter live ops would be that you can create time-limited goals within the length of the live op. One example could be Marvel Snap. Marvel Snap, they have this month-long season, but what they do is they run on the weekends, they run time-limited challenges, which make that players need to monetize and need to do that spike of engagement in order to acquire it. And if you have typical collection event that lasts for 2 weeks or for 1 week, try out this thing. Try out adding time-limited goals that run for a specific time within the event, and you will probably increase the engagement and monetization. Another tool that is quite common is to make the event progressively unlock or add gates that are time-based. And generally, this is more used for engagement-first features, such as battle passes and stuff like that. One example could be Fortnite, that they progressively unlock the quests. So engaged players cannot come and the first day deplete all the quests of the entire month. That means that those even high engaged players, they are going to come back regularly to complete the set of missions that are being unlocked. And those that join later in the event, they will still have a lot of content when they join. When it comes to cadence and intensity, 3 things to take in account is first, in order to be effective, Liveops need to have this kind of I can miss it out component. So you don't want to have the same Liveop running too often with the same exact experience and rewards. That's where versatility comes in. But also you need to take in account that if you are constantly running very high intensity Liveops, it can, depend on the game and the type of players, it can burn the players, no? So often it's good to give them a rest, but I'll explain how exactly, because one thing that you should try to avoid is having situations where there is nothing running in your game other than the core game. This is a discussion I've had many times with particularly console developers, because when they go into mobile, they say like, oh, well, but maybe after a big event that maybe we should give players a rest for like 1 week where they don't have that many stuff to do so that they kind of recover. But in reality, what that means is that players that are highly engaged are going to not have content, and probably you're going to suffer a very high churn and very high hangover effect when there's nothing to do. So some tips that I can give you on this regard is that all live should think about Liveops on how they can have a cycle where very high intensity Liveop, they won't come back after until a certain amount of time has happened. While if you have low intensity features that are not that as demanding, you can make them run with way more cadence. And the key of that is to try to intercalate high intensity with low intensity, no? So for example, after you have an event that takes a lot of effort, that makes people spend a lot of money and all that, instead of having one day where players connect and there's nothing going on in the game, what you can do is have an event that is maybe more passive, no? That maybe makes players enjoy the content that they just acquired, or grants progress to players just by doing regular game actions. Another advice that I can give you is to avoid giving everything everywhere, because if all your Liveops gives the same exact things, that takes away the reasons for players to engage. And on the other hand, if different Liveops give very different rewards, you can make the two Liveops that are quite similar feel very different, because the objective that the player is pursuing is very different. You also want to be on sync with game economy, because you want to plan that if there is a Liveop, let's say an offer that is going to inject a lot of hard currency in the game, then put it next to another Liveop that is going to drain all that. And as I said before, exploit the versatility of your features to increase the sense of variety, so players don't feel that the Liveops are repetitive. There's some quick tips that I'm going to give you on cadence and intensity in offers, because one thing that I've seen a lot of times happen is that if you run a very aggressive strategy of offers, you can make that your players do not spend unless there is an offer. So some tips on how to deal with that is, instead of discounting or doing offers on hard currency, try to limit that and try to instead discount the items themselves, because then that's going to give you a wider range of things to discount. And when players do not buy this item that is discounted, it will take they don't know how long until this item will be discounted, as opposed to giving a discount on hard currency where you are discounting everything, and it may take a lot of time for the player to deplete their inventory in order to spend again. Link offers to seasonal stuff. So it's exceptional. That's why the price is lower. Don't expect it to happen often. If you run very aggressive offers, particularly targeting on hard currency, limit the amount of times that they can buy it, because otherwise players can spend everything that they were planning to spend during the month in one day, and then the rest of the month it's not able to you're not able to monetize them. And yeah, like I said, time the offers with Liveops that sync the resources that you're injecting. No, so if you're doing an offer that requires a lot of currency, put it next to an event that demands a lot of currency. And one thing that happens often is that Liveops create this magic button where, when the revenue of the game is bad that day or that week, you have a set of emergency offers that you trigger. So try to avoid that. That's the red button. Sometimes you need to press it, but don't do it often, because that's a patch, no? And if, for example, the problem why you are generating so bad monetization is that it's the hard currency is players have too much hard currency. If you put an offer, you're gonna make it bad. Getting to the end. Sorry for the overtime. Yeah, another issue is with reach. No, in Liveops, reach is very problematic because of their time limited nature. Players, you're not going to have this thing where, like, oh, you're low engagement, but with enough time, you're going to be able to achieve everything. No, the Liveop is going to expire. So some tips that I can give you in order to improve the reach of your features is, first, if you do something marketing oriented, enable it to all players and grant easy access to at least some of the exclusive content. Don't make them like play 100 hours until they can get to the event that was why they downloaded the game. Another tip is that when you're managing the rewards, try to create different milestones of rewards within your Liveop so that they can become targets for different levels of engagement from players. No, so the newbies can reach a milestone of rewards. The high engaged players try to get everything. And last, try to segment the balancing for different layers of progression. So don't balance it only for the late players. Try to present a balance that is customized for the different stages of the game. That way, everybody will be able to engage with your event. I'm going to go very quick on this. Sorry for the overtime. Yeah, so very quickly, how to build an effective Liveops plan. There are 4 tips. First, you need to try to understand the natural engagement and spend cycles of the game. If the game is live, try to see when your players naturally spend more and when do they spend less. If you have competition, benchmark your competition. Try to understand when they are running the key events and so on. Imagine this example. No? In this example, we have strong weekends, especially the first and the third, because that's when money comes in for a lot of people in the US. And we have very low performance in the mid of the week. No, so then when we're going to try to establish a repeatable schedule of Liveops. No, first by adding elements that are procyclical, that try to improve the positive things that we see. No, we saw that there's a lot of revenue coming on the weekends, particularly on the first and the third. So what we're going to do is drop a lot of events there. No, we're going to put new characters on the first weekend of the month, a big offer in the third one. We're going to have, instead of a 30 days battle pass, we're going to have 2 14 days battle pass. So we incentivize the behavior that is naturally. No, players naturally spend on those weekends. So I'm going to try to make them spend or engage as much as I can on those days. But then you also want to do the other way around. No, like, okay, we see that the performance is quite low in the midweek, so I'm going to try to counter that. And we're going to put events like, for example, rotatory discounts, so that players can need to monetize every day of the week, or they can find reasons to monetize, as well as a series of events that make them engage on the days where they would not be as engaged. No, so positive. But then once you had that template, don't just apply it. You need to look at the specific period where you're going to run it and then customize it. Let's say that it's February. No, in February we find Saint Valentine. So instead of just applying the Liveop, we would customize it, adding this thing on top. No, like maybe adding a Saint Valentine's gift calendar, so that we improve the retention and we make players come back. And so players, there's a very high DAU by the time that we drop a very important, very big discount and so on. No, so yeah, you want to adapt that repeatable template to the period where you're going to run it. And what is very important, and probably if you need to take away one thing out of this topic, is that you're not gonna get, it's impossible, or at least to me, to get the perfect schedule of calendar, perfect Liveops schedule. It's impossible to get the perfect design of a Liveop. What is important when it comes to Liveops is to think that it's a marathon, and therefore what you need to have is a continuous improvement. That's why it's so important that you are able to deliver things smoothly, because that's going to give you a lot of spare capacity to constantly think on how, with every iteration, you can improve your Liveops by running different experiments on how the Liveops are, how they are scheduled, and so on. For example, one example would come from Travel Town, where they have done several activations of this type of offer. But with each activation, they are trying something different. No, like the first one, the idea was that you buy something and then you get an extra, and that incentivizes you to spend. But then they did another activation, and as you can see, they decreased the amount of the offer, but they increased the amount of the gift to try to give it more value. And in the latest experiment, they have added, you buy once and you get 2 other things. So it increases even more the effect that they are trying to do, where you buy something and you get the impression that you are getting more from the purchase. And in my opinion, what even if you're very good at guessing, even if you have very good first bets, what makes something go from just good to fantastic is this constant experimentation and this kind of subtle changes which keeps on improving your Liveops so they are always in the path of becoming perfect. So yeah, thank you very much for your attention. Sorry for going over time, and hope to see you. I'm not going to do questions because I spent that time. But if you can reach out to me later, I'll be glad to answer anything. Thank you.